Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Online dating was supposed to be a fun way to meet people. I was 25, single, and tired of being set up with my mom's friend's son, or the awkward encounters at work. So, I dove into the world of dating apps. It was a mixed bag, to say the least. Bad pickup lines, guys who looked nothing like their photos, conversations that fizzled out after a few messages. But then I matched with Ethan. He was different, thoughtful, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. We texted for a couple of weeks, and the conversation flowed easily. He wasn't pushy, and he respected my boundaries. His pictures were normal, no shirtless gym selfies or weird angles. He seemed normal, which, in the world of online dating, was a breath of fresh air. We decided to meet for coffee. He suggested a local cafe that I loved. He was even more attractive in person, tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. The date went well. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. I felt a connection, a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. We laughed, we shared stories, and we made plans for a second date. The second date was even better. We went to a museum, walked around the park, and ended the night with dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant. He was a gentleman, opening doors, pulling out my chair, and making me feel like I was the only woman in the world. I was starting to fall for him. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other almost every day. We went hiking, saw movies, cooked dinner together. He was everything I had been looking for. Kind, intelligent, and genuinely caring. He met my friends, and they loved him. My family adored him. Everything felt perfect. Then, things started to shift. Slowly, subtly, but definitely. He started getting possessive, asking where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. At first, I brushed it off as him being protective, caring. But it started to feel different. He didn't like it when I went out with my friends without him. He'd get sulky and withdrawn, making me feel guilty for wanting to spend time with other people. He started showing up unannounced at my apartment. "Just wanted to surprise you," he'd say, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I tried to explain that I needed my space, that I couldn't be with him 24/7, but he didn't seem to understand. He'd say things like, "But I just love being with you," or "I don't want to miss a moment with you." The compliments turned into criticisms. He started pointing out flaws, things I had never even thought about before. My hair wasn't styled right. My clothes weren't flattering. My jokes weren't funny enough. I started to feel self-conscious, constantly worried about what he thought of me. The sweet, caring Ethan I had fallen for was disappearing, replaced by someone controlling and critical. I tried to talk to him about it, but he'd deny everything, twisting my words, making me feel like I was crazy. "You're just being sensitive," he'd say. "I'm just trying to help you be the best version of yourself." One night, we were at my apartment, watching a movie. I got up to get a glass of water, and when I came back, he was looking through my phone. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked up, his face expressionless. "Just curious," he said, handing me back my phone. "Who's this Mark guy who keeps texting you?" Mark was a co-worker, someone I occasionally grabbed lunch with. "He's just a friend," I said, trying to stay calm. "A friend," Ethan said, his voice rising. "Why would he be texting you so late at night?" "It's not late," I said, "and it's none of your business." That's when his eyes changed. They went cold, hard. The kind eyes I had fallen for were gone, replaced by something dark and unsettling. He stood up, towering over me. "Everything you do is my business," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're my girlfriend." I took a step back, suddenly realizing the danger I was in. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. This was someone else, someone I didn't recognize, someone who scared me. "I think you should leave," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, his eyes burning into my soul. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You'll regret this." I reached for my phone, my hand shaking. "I'm calling the police," I said. His expression changed again, softening, becoming almost pleading. "Don't do that," he said. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I love you so much. I can't stand the thought of losing you." I didn't believe him. The mask had slipped, and I had seen the monster beneath. "Get out," I said, my voice firm. He hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked out the door. I locked it behind him, my hands still shaking. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, clutching a knife, listening to every sound, terrified that he would come back. He didn't, but the fear lingered. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and started looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. I was never felt unsafe until that moment when I saw the darkness in his eyes, the possessiveness that turned into something sinister. Online dating isn't always a fairy tale, and sometimes the monsters are hiding behind a charming smile and a carefully curated profile. It taught me a valuable lesson. Trust your instincts, even when they're telling you something you don't want to hear. Dating apps. Swiping left, swiping right, the endless scroll of faces and curated bios. It's a modern ritual, a way to connect with people outside your usual circles, a hope for something, anything really. I was never particularly good at it, to be honest. I'm not the type who thrives on first impressions or witty banter. I prefer getting to know someone slowly, peeling back the layers over time. But hey, a girl's gotta try, right? I mean, my friends all seem to be finding dates, hookups, even relationships this way. So I made a profile, put up some flattering pictures, with a little help from filters, I won't lie, and started swiping. Most of my matches were forgettable. A few half-hearted conversations that fizzled out after a couple of days. A handful of awkward coffee dates that went nowhere. Then there was Ben. He was different. His profile was simple, just a few pictures of him hiking and one of him playing guitar. His bio was short and sweet, looking for someone to explore the world with. It was corny, sure, but it also felt genuine. We matched, and I sent him a message. Our conversations flowed easily. We talked about our favorite books, our travel dreams, our families. He seemed smart, funny, and kind. He listened when I talked and asked thoughtful questions. After a week of chatting online, we decided to meet for dinner. He suggested a small Italian place in my neighborhood, nothing fancy. The dinner was great. Ben was even more charming in person. He had this easygoing confidence that put me at ease. We laughed, we shared stories, and the conversation never lulled. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. He walked me back to my apartment, and we kissed goodnight. It was perfect. We started seeing each other regularly. We went to movies, concerts, museums. We cooked dinner at each other's places, went for long walks in the park, and stayed up late talking. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. He was kind, intelligent, adventurous, and he seemed genuinely interested in me. For the first time in a long time, I felt happy. A few months into the relationship, things started to shift. Subtle things, almost imperceptible at first. He started getting possessive, not in a creepy, controlling way, but in a more subtle way. He'd ask where I was going, who I was with, and what I was doing, multiple times a day. At first, I thought it was sweet, like he cared about me. But then it started to feel suffocating. He also started isolating me from my friends. He'd make little comments about them, suggesting they were bad influences or that they didn't really care about me. He'd say things like, "They don't really understand you like I do," or "You deserve better friends." It was subtle, but it chipped away at my relationships. I started seeing my friends less and less, spending more and more time with Ben. Then there were the mood swings. One minute he'd be the sweet, charming guy I fell in love with, and the next he'd be cold, distant, and irritable. He'd get angry over small things, like if I left the dishes in the sink or if I was a few minutes late for a date. He'd apologize later, saying he was stressed or tired, but the incidents became more frequent. I tried to talk to him about it, but he'd always brush it off. He'd say I was being too sensitive or that I was imagining things. He'd make me feel like I was the one with the problem. I started to doubt myself. Was I being too sensitive? Was I imagining things? Maybe he was just stressed. Maybe I was the one ruining the relationship. One Saturday, Ben asked me to go hiking with him. He said he wanted to take me to this amazing spot he knew, a hidden waterfall deep in the woods. I hesitated. I hadn't been feeling well lately, and I was tired. But he was so insistent, and I didn't want to disappoint him. So I agreed. We drove for hours, deep into the mountains. The road got narrower and bumpier as we went, and eventually, we turned onto a dirt path that seemed to lead nowhere. I started to feel uneasy. "Are you sure this is the right way?" I asked. "Trust me," he said, smiling. "It's worth it." We parked the car and started hiking. The trail was steep and rocky, and the woods were dense and dark. I struggled to keep up with Ben, who seemed to be in his element. After about an hour, we reached the waterfall. It was beautiful, cascading down a rocky cliff into a crystal-clear pool. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. We were completely alone, miles from civilization. We sat on a rock near the waterfall, and Ben put his arm around me. "Isn't this amazing?" he said, his eyes shining. I nodded, forcing a smile. "It's beautiful," I said. He leaned in and kissed me. I kissed him back, but I couldn't relax. I felt tense and anxious. When we broke apart, he looked at me, his eyes intense. "I love you," he said. I started to say, but I stopped. I wasn't sure if I loved him anymore. I wasn't even sure if I liked him anymore. The person I fell in love with seemed to have disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. He seemed to sense my hesitation. His expression changed, his eyes hardening. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice tight. I don't know," I said, my voice trembling. "I just haven't been feeling like myself lately." He stood up, his eyes blazing with anger. "Is this about your friends?" he said, his voice rising. "Are they telling you to break up with me?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's not about them. It's about you. It's about how you've been acting lately." He took a step closer to me, his face inches from mine. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice low and menacing. "You've been possessive, isolating me from my friends, and you've been so moody," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't even recognize you anymore." His eyes narrowed and his jaw clenched. "You're being ridiculous," he said. "I'm just trying to protect you. Your friends are toxic, and they're trying to ruin our relationship." "That's not true," I said, standing my ground. "They care about me. You're the one who's trying to ruin our relationship." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Don't talk to me like that," he said, his voice dripping with venom. I tried to pull away, but he held on tight. "Let go of me," I said, my voice rising. He didn't let go. He pulled me closer to him, his eyes filled with rage. "You're mine," he said, his voice a low growl. "You belong to me." I struggled against him, kicking and screaming. "Let me go," I yelled. "Let me go." He tightened his grip on my arm, his nails digging into my skin. "You're not going anywhere," he said. I was terrified. I realized I was alone with a man I no longer knew, a man who was capable of anything. I never felt unsafe until that moment when I saw the pure rage in his eyes. It was like a switch flipped, and the charming, sweet Ben disappeared. Okay, so, I've always been a pretty trusting person. Maybe too trusting. I like to see the best in people, which is probably why I ignored all the red flags when I met Mark. I was fresh out of a really bad breakup, feeling super vulnerable, and probably way too eager to jump back into the dating scene. I thought maybe using a dating app would be a good way to meet people, so I downloaded Linked Hearts. It was supposed to be for people who were looking for serious relationships, not just hookups. That's where I saw Mark. His profile was pretty standard, decent-looking guy, liked hiking, claimed to be a huge foodie. His pictures were a little generic, mostly selfies with filters, but he seemed nice enough. We matched pretty quickly, and he messaged me almost immediately. He was super complimentary, telling me how beautiful I was and how he loved my sense of humor, based solely on the 2 sentences I'd written in my bio. Looking back, it was a little much, but at the time, I was eating it up. It felt good to be noticed, to be wanted. We chatted for a few days, mostly just surface-level stuff. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family. He seemed genuinely interested, which was a refreshing change from the guys I dated before. He was also super available, like always online, always responding to my messages within minutes. I should have seen that as a red flag, but I brushed it off. Maybe he just had a lot of free time, right? After a week of chatting, he asked me out on a date. He suggested this fancy Italian restaurant downtown. I was hesitant at first. It felt like a lot for a first date, but he insisted, saying he wanted to treat me like a queen. Again, a little over the top, but I was flattered. I agreed. picked out a nice dress, and tried to ignore the nagging feeling of unease in the back of my mind. The date started off okay. He was charming, attentive, and funny. He complimented my dress, pulled out my chair, and ordered a bottle of expensive wine. He asked me about my day, listened intently to my stories, and laughed at all my jokes. He seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But as the night went on, things started to get weird. He started asking really personal questions, like about my past relationships, my insecurities, and my biggest fears. I tried to deflect, but he kept pushing, saying he wanted to really get to know me. It felt invasive, like he was trying to dig up something he wasn't entitled to know. Then he started talking about himself, but not in a normal way. He talked about how he'd been hurt in the past, how he'd been betrayed by people he trusted, and how he was finally ready to open his heart again. He kept staring at me with these intense, almost desperate eyes, like he was begging me to fix him. It was uncomfortable. After dinner, he insisted on walking me home, even though I lived pretty far away. I tried to decline, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He said he wanted to make sure I got home safe. I reluctantly agreed, hoping the walk would be quick and uneventful. But as we walked, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He started rambling about conspiracy theories, government surveillance, and the shadow people who were controlling our lives. He kept looking over his shoulder, whispering about how they were watching us. I tried to change the subject, but he was too far gone. By the time we reached my apartment building, I was terrified. I just wanted to get inside and away from him. But as I reached for my keys, he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. He pulled me close, his face inches from mine, and whispered, "I know who you really are." I froze. What did that even mean? Before I could respond, he started kissing me, forcefully, desperately. I tried to push him away, but he wouldn't let go. I could feel his hands groping me, his breath hot on my neck. I was panicking, struggling to break free, but he was too strong. Finally, I managed to knee him in the groin. He stumbled back, clutching his stomach, giving me the opportunity to run inside. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my apartment, locking the door behind me. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bedroom, shaking with fear. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I had almost been assaulted by a guy I met on a dating app. I felt violated, disgusted, and utterly stupid for ignoring all the warning signs. The next day, I blocked Mark on everything. I deleted linked hearts, deactivated all my social media accounts, and basically went into hiding. I was too ashamed to tell anyone what had happened. I didn't want them to judge me, to blame me for being so naive. But the experience left a lasting scar. I became paranoid, distrustful of everyone I met. I started seeing danger everywhere, imagining threats around every corner. I had trouble sleeping, plagued by nightmares of Mark's face, his desperate eyes, his forceful kiss. It took me a long time to recover. I went to therapy, talked to friends, and slowly started to rebuild my confidence. I realized that what happened wasn't my fault. I was a victim, and I deserved to be safe and respected. I'm still wary of dating apps, and I'm definitely more cautious about who I let into my life. But I refuse to let one bad experience ruin everything. I'm still hopeful that one day, I'll find someone who is kind, trustworthy, and genuinely interested in me. Not just some creepy guy hiding behind a filtered profile. I am not going to stop dating. I am just going to be more careful and make sure to look for the red flags and that I am more safe than before. I will never forget this event. It started with a dating app, the kind where you swipe left or right based on a blurry photo and a 3-line bio. I wasn't expecting much, just a distraction from the monotony of my work-from-home life. Then I matched with Alex, whose profile picture showed him silhouetted against a sunset, and whose bio read, "Looking for someone to explore hidden gems with." Vague, sure, but intriguing enough to warrant a message. We chatted for a couple of weeks, mostly about our shared love of obscure music and hiking trails. He seemed normal, maybe a little quirky, but in a charming way. We decided to meet for coffee, a standard first date. He suggested a small, independent cafe I'd never heard of, tucked away in a quiet part of town. I looked it up beforehand. It seemed legit, with decent reviews and photos of latte art. Nothing to suggest it was a front for anything sinister. The cafe was even more secluded than I expected. It was located down a narrow alleyway, almost hidden from the main street. The sign was faded, and the windows were dark. But the reviews were good. so I went inside. When I walked in, the place was nearly empty. A lone barista stood behind the counter, looking bored. He perked up when I walked in and asked what I would like. I ordered a latte and sat at a table to wait for Alex. The lighting was dim, and the furniture was mismatched, giving the place an odd, almost theatrical atmosphere. Alex arrived about 10 minutes later. He was taller than I'd imagined, with piercing blue eyes and a nervous energy that was almost palpable. He apologized for being late, explaining that he'd had trouble finding parking. We made small talk about the cafe, the weather, and our jobs. He was a bit intense, staring at me intently as I spoke, but I chalked it up to first date jitters. As we talked, I noticed that the barista was watching us, his eyes darting back and forth between us with an unnerving intensity. He kept wiping down the counter, even though it was already spotless, as if trying to create a barrier between us and him. Every time I looked at him, he wouldn't break the stare, which made me uncomfortable. After about an hour, Alex suggested we go for a walk. He said there was a beautiful park nearby that he wanted to show me. I hesitated. I didn't know him that well, and the thought of wandering around a secluded park with a stranger made me uneasy. But he was persuasive, and I didn't want to seem like I was being too cautious. Plus, I wanted to like him. It was getting boring matching with people and going on dates. It was very rare when I got butterflies. I agreed. The park was indeed beautiful, with winding trails, lush greenery, and a small lake. But as we walked deeper into the park, away from the main paths, I started to feel increasingly uncomfortable. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The sounds of the city faded away, replaced by the rustling of trees and the distant cawing of crows. The sounds around me were getting eerier. Alex began to talk about his past, his voice low and urgent. He told me about a troubled childhood, a failed marriage, and a string of dead-end jobs. He spoke with a raw honesty that was both captivating and unsettling. I felt a strange mix of sympathy and alarm. He kept asking if I knew how it felt to feel alone, lost, as if no one cared. He held my hand when he said that. As we reached the center of the park, Alex stopped walking. He turned to face me, his eyes shining with an unnerving intensity. "I have something to show you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. He flipped it open, revealing a tiny photograph inside. It was a picture of a young woman. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't recognize her, but there was something about her that sent a shiver down my spine. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Alex smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She's someone who made me very happy," he said. "Someone who understood me." He kept saying that like it was a script. He then led me to a secluded part of the park, overgrown with weeds and shrouded in shadow. In the center of the clearing stood a gnarled old tree, its branches twisted and bare. The sight alone made me sick to my stomach. Alex pulled out a knife. The blade was dull and rusted. It looked as if it hadn't been used in a long time. He began carving into the tree. He started mumbling. As he got done with the carvings, I realized what he was doing. I wanted to run. It was my name and Alex plus heart. He turned around and looked at me. It felt as if he was staring into my soul. He was holding the knife. He smiled again. "She didn't want to be with me," he said as his voice cracked, staring at the carving as he started to breathe heavier. I then looked at him. "What?" As I tried to ask calmly. "It doesn't matter. She wanted to leave me. She wanted to move on with her life and leave me alone." As he screamed at the top of his lungs, I began walking backwards. I knew that I needed to get out of here, but I didn't want to provoke him. I started backing away slowly, my eyes fixed on him. "Alex, let's just calm down," I said, my voice trembling. "Let's talk about this." But he didn't seem to hear me. He was staring at the carving on the tree, muttering to himself, his eyes filled with a strange, manic glee. He seemed to be having a conversation with himself. "You get me, don't you?" he said to the carving. Suddenly, he lunged at me, the knife raised high above his head. I screamed and ducked, narrowly avoiding the blade. I turned and ran, as fast as I could, back towards the main path. I heard him crashing through the underbrush behind me, his heavy breathing growing closer. I didn't dare look back. I ran blind. I didn't see where I was going. I could feel my chest getting tight as I was running. The adrenaline was kicking in. I burst out of the woods and onto the main path, gasping for breath. People stared at me, their faces filled with concern. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the park, where I collapsed onto a bench, sobbing uncontrollably. I called the police, who arrived within minutes. They searched the park, but they couldn't find Alex. They took my statement and advised me to stay away from the area. I never heard from Alex again. The police said they had a few leads, but nothing concrete. I tried to forget about what happened, but the memory of that day haunted me. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more cautious now. I always meet in public places, and I never go anywhere alone with someone I don't know well. I learned a valuable lesson that day. You can never really know someone, no matter how charming or normal they may seem. There is always a dark side, a hidden gem of madness, waiting to be uncovered. What was supposed to be a routine meetup turned into a moment in life that I wish I could forget. The dating scene after a messy divorce was, well, a scene. I hadn't been out there since flip phones were cool, and swiping left and right felt like some bizarre video game where the prize was a potential lifetime of happiness, or more realistically, a lukewarm cup of coffee and awkward conversation. I downloaded all the apps, Bumble, Hinge, even Tinder for a laugh. The messages were a mixed bag, the predictable hey, the cringe-worthy pickup lines, and the occasional decent attempt at conversation. I actually started to enjoy it, in a weird, detached way. It was like anthropological research. I met some genuinely nice people, some complete weirdos, and a whole lot of guys who looked way better in their pictures than they did in person. There was Mark, who spent the entire date talking about his ex-wife. Red flag, obviously. There was David, who insisted on ordering for me, and then got offended when I didn't like his choice. And then there was Chris. Chris was different. We matched on Hinge, and his profile was surprisingly thoughtful. He listed his hobbies as hiking, cooking, and volunteering at an animal shelter. His pictures were candid, showing him laughing with friends and looking genuinely happy. He seemed like a normal, well-adjusted human being, which, after the initial dating app deluge, felt like a godsend. Our conversations were easy and engaging. We talked about our favorite books, our travel dreams, and our families. He was a good listener, asked insightful questions, and didn't try to impress me with some fabricated version of himself. He was just real. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet for dinner. He suggested a small Italian place in my neighborhood, a place I'd been wanting to try for ages. He made the reservation, walked me to my door at the end of the night, and even sent a follow-up text thanking me for a great evening. The whole thing felt almost old-fashioned, like something out of a movie. We went out again the following week. This time, we went for a hike in the nearby state park. The weather was perfect, the scenery was stunning, and the conversation flowed even more effortlessly than before. We talked about our fears, our hopes, and our dreams for the future. He was open and vulnerable, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't opened up to anyone in years. I was starting to feel hopeful. Over the next few weeks, Chris became a regular part of my life. We went to concerts, museums, and even a few weekend getaways. He met my friends, who all loved him. He was kind, considerate, and always made me feel special. I genuinely thought I might be falling in love. I hadn't had any reservations and genuinely thought he was safe. Then came the night at his place. I had been to his apartment a few times before. It was a typical bachelor pad, clean, organized, but a bit lacking in personality. He was a minimalist and didn't have much on the walls or shelves, but it wasn't bare. It felt like he just hadn't found his style yet, or didn't bother because it was only him. That night we made plans to cook dinner together. I brought a bottle of wine, and we spent the evening laughing, cooking, and dancing in the kitchen. After dinner, we moved to the living room, curled up on the couch, and started watching a movie. Halfway through the movie, he got up to grab another bottle of wine. He was gone for longer than I expected. I was starting to doze off when he finally came back, but I could smell it and could see he had something other than wine. He was carrying 2 glasses of red wine, and 1 glass he had rolled something into. The smell of weed hit my nose, and I instantly felt uneasy. I had made it clear when we first met that I didn't smoke. "Hey, I made some special wine," he said with a grin. "I've got some weed in there. It'll loosen you up." I looked at him, a knot forming in my stomach. I don't smoke," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I told you that." He laughed, a strange, high-pitched sound that didn't sound like him at all. "Oh, come on," he said, pushing the glass towards me. Just try it. It'll be fun. It's just a little. I can make you a new glass. I thought you were more adventurous than this. I shook my head, my anxiety rising. No, really, I don't want it. He sighed, his expression hardening. Don't be such a prude, he said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. It's just weed. What's the big deal? I pushed myself up from the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. The big deal is that I said I don't want it, and you're not respecting that. He stood up, his eyes narrowing. What's gotten into you? He said, stepping closer to me. I thought we were having a good time. We were, I said, backing away from him, until you tried to pressure me into doing something I didn't want to do. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. Don't be like that, he said, his voice low and menacing. Just relax and have some fun. I tried to pull my arm away, but he wouldn't let go. Let go of me, I said, my voice shaking. His grip tightened even further. Don't make me angry, he said, his eyes blazing. I'm making this for you. How dare you act so spoiled? That was the moment I truly felt unsafe. It wasn't just the weed, or the pressure, or the fact that he wasn't respecting my boundaries. It was the sudden shift in his demeanor, the darkness that had crept into his eyes, the raw aggression that radiated from his body. I'd spent so many months with him and trusted him, so much that I didn't think for a moment I'd be put in this situation. I never felt unsafe until that moment when I realized I was alone in his apartment with someone I thought I knew, someone who was now holding me against my will. I yanked my arm free, surprised by the force I was able to muster. I'm leaving, I said, my voice trembling. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, watching me with a cold, calculating gaze as I grabbed my purse and fled out the door. I ran all the way home, my heart pounding, tears streaming down my face. I never spoke to Chris again. I blocked his number, deleted him from social media, and tried to erase him from my memory. But the experience left a mark on me. It shattered my trust, made me question my judgment, and left me with a lingering fear that I couldn't shake. It was a stark reminder that you can never truly know someone, and that even the most charming and seemingly harmless people can harbor a darkness within. I've been on dates since. No one has tried to force drugs on me, but I think about it every time, and it has affected how quickly I trust someone new. I have a code word with my friends to let them know if I'm in danger and don't leave my drink unattended. It may sound paranoid, but I never felt unsafe until that moment, and now I know that even the most promising connections can turn into nightmares in an instant. It started with a message on findlovenow.com, a dating site so generic it practically screamed desperation. I wasn't expecting much, just another forgettable exchange leading to a polite ghosting. But then I matched with BookLover88. Her profile was simple, a blurry picture of a woman holding a dog-eared copy of Wuthering Heights, a brief bio about her love for classic literature and long walks, and an almost unsettlingly enthusiastic invitation to discuss Jane Austen over coffee. I'm a sucker for Austen, so I bit. We messaged back and forth for a couple of weeks. Her grammar was impeccable, her references were spot on, and she seemed genuinely interested in my, admittedly boring, life as a data analyst. It was all very normal, maybe too normal for online dating. I started to get that little flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. We decided to meet at a small, independent bookstore cafe downtown. It was a Saturday afternoon, bustling but not crowded, with the aroma of coffee and old paper hanging in the air, the perfect setting for a literary-themed first date. I arrived a few minutes early, snagged a table near the window, and nervously checked my reflection in my phone screen. She was late. Not a big deal, I told myself. Traffic, parking, who knows. I ordered a coffee and tried to distract myself with a book. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. I sent her a text. Everything okay? Just checking in. No response. A little seed of doubt started to sprout in my mind. Was I being catfished? Was this some elaborate prank? I pulled up her profile again, scrutinizing the blurry picture. I tried reverse image searching it, but nothing came up. Maybe she was just a no-show. It happens. Just as I was about to give up and leave, a woman walked into the cafe. She wasn't exactly what I expected. Her profile picture was so blurry that I assumed she was young. She looked middle-aged, maybe late 40s, with tired eyes and a severe, almost librarian-like demeanor. She was wearing a long, dark coat that seemed out of place for the mild weather. She scanned the room, her gaze lingering on me for a moment before moving on. I almost didn't recognize her, but something about her posture, the way she held herself, seemed familiar. Then, she walked straight to my table. "Are you Mark?" she asked, her voice surprisingly soft. I nodded, a little taken aback. "Book Lover 88? She smiled, a fleeting, almost sad expression. "Please, call me Eleanor." I stood up, pulling out a chair for her. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "I had some unexpected errands to run." The date started off awkwardly. Eleanor seemed nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee. She didn't meet my eyes, and her conversation felt stilted, almost rehearsed. She asked me about my job, my hobbies, my family, the standard first date questions, but without any real enthusiasm. As we talked, I noticed something strange about her. She kept glancing around the cafe, as if she was expecting someone to appear. She also seemed to be fixated on the other customers, observing them with an almost unnerving intensity. "Is everything all right, Eleanor?" I asked, concerned. "You seem a little distracted." She jumped, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, forcing a smile. "I'm just a little anxious. I haven't been on a date in a very long time." I tried to reassure her, but her nervousness only seemed to increase. She kept fidgeting with her coat, pulling it tighter around her as if she was cold. Then, she started talking about Jane Austen. It was like a switch flipped. Her eyes lit up, her voice became animated, and she launched into a passionate analysis of Pride and Prejudice, dissecting the characters and themes with an almost scholarly precision. It was fascinating to listen to her, and I found myself drawn into her enthusiasm. But even as she spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her knowledge of Austen seemed almost too detailed, too obsessive. She quoted passages from memory, cited obscure critical essays, and even referenced unpublished letters. It was as if she had dedicated her entire life to studying Jane Austen. Then, she started talking about the darker aspects of Austen's novels. She spoke of repressed desires, hidden resentments, and the subtle ways in which women were trapped by societal expectations. Her tone became increasingly somber, and her eyes took on a haunted look. "Don't you think," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "that there's a certain sadness to Austen's heroines? A sense that they're never truly free?" I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "I suppose so," I said cautiously. "But they also find happiness, don't they? They overcome obstacles and find love." Eleanor shook her head. "Love is an illusion," she said, her voice filled with a strange intensity. "A temporary distraction from the inevitable pain and suffering of life." I was starting to get seriously creeped out. This wasn't the light-hearted literary discussion I had been expecting. This was something else. I tried to change the subject, but Eleanor was fixated on her dark musings. She started talking about the tragic fates of female authors, the loneliness and isolation they often faced, and the ways in which their genius was often misunderstood or ignored. "Don't you think," she said, her eyes burning into mine, "that there's a certain curse to being a woman of intellect? A sense that you're destined to be alone, misunderstood, and ultimately forgotten?" I stood up abruptly, knocking over my chair. "I think I should go," I said, my voice trembling. "This is getting a little intense for me." Eleanor didn't try to stop me. She just sat there, staring at me with those haunted eyes, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Goodbye, Mark," she said softly. "I hope you find what you're looking for." I practically ran out of the cafe, gasping for breath. I didn't stop until I was several blocks away, my heart pounding in my chest. I never saw Eleanor again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. I deleted her profile from my contacts, blocked her number, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But every now and then, late at night, I find myself thinking about her haunted eyes, her obsessive knowledge of Jane Austen, and her chilling pronouncements about love, loneliness, and the curse of female intellect. And I wonder if I was just on a bad day, or if I had stumbled into something much darker, something that I'm still trying to understand. I think it was the latter. I stay offline now. I used to think these stories were made up until it happened to me. All the dating app horror stories, the ghosting, the catfishing, the downright bizarre encounters, I'd scroll through them on Reddit, chuckling to myself, thinking, that would never happen to me. I was too smart, too discerning. I knew how to spot the red flags. Famous last words, right? It started innocently enough. I'd been single for a while, working long hours, and felt like I was missing out. All my friends were coupled up, posting cute brunch pictures and vacation selfies. I figured, what the hell, I'll give Bumble a try. The swiping was mind-numbing, as always, but then I matched with Liam. He was different. Not in a glaring, obvious way, but in a subtle, intriguing way. His profile was understated, just a couple of pictures. One of him hiking, another of him playing guitar, and a short bio that said he was an architect with a passion for live music and good coffee. Seemed harmless enough. Our first few conversations were great. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. He asked thoughtful questions about my job, my hobbies, my family. It was a refreshing change from the usual surface-level banter I was used to. After about a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested a small, independent cafe downtown, one I'd never been to before. It was a cozy little place, tucked away on a quiet side street. Liam was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the window. He looked even better in person than in his pictures. Tall, dark hair, kind eyes, and a disarmingly charming smile. The coffee date went perfectly. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. We discovered a shared love for obscure indie bands and a mutual hatred for reality TV. He made me laugh. He listened intently when I spoke, and he even paid without making a big deal about it. I left feeling giddy, like I'd finally met someone special. We went out again a few days later, this time to a concert. He knew all the words to every song, and he wasn't afraid to dance like an idiot. I loved it. He felt safe. He felt genuine. Over the next few weeks, we became inseparable. We went on hikes, explored new restaurants, spent lazy Sundays watching movies on the couch. He met my friends, and they loved him. My family adored him. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But I was so caught up in the whirlwind romance that I didn't stop to question it. Then, the little things started. Small inconsistencies in his stories. A forgotten detail here, a slightly different version of an event there. At first, I brushed them off as memory lapses. Everyone makes mistakes, right? But the inconsistencies kept piling up, becoming more frequent and more noticeable. I started to feel a nagging sense of unease, a feeling that something wasn't quite right. I decided to do a little digging. I know, it's creepy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. I started with a simple Google search. Liam, his last name. Architect. Nothing. No LinkedIn profile, no company website, no professional affiliations. That was odd. Most architects have some kind of online presence. I tried searching for his name on social media. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Nothing. It was like he didn't exist. I started to panic. Who was this person I'd been spending all my time with? I decided to confront him. I waited until we were alone, sitting on the couch after dinner, and casually brought up the fact that I couldn't find him online. "Oh yeah," he said, with a nervous laugh. "I'm not really into social media. I find it kind of draining. But what about your architecture work?" I asked. I couldn't find anything about that either. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "I'm a freelancer. I work mostly on private commissions. It's all very confidential." I didn't believe him. His explanations sounded rehearsed, flimsy, but I didn't push it. I was too scared of what I might find. That night, after he left, I did something I'm not proud of. I went through his phone. I know, it's a massive invasion of privacy, but I felt like I had no other choice. What I found was chilling. His phone was almost empty. No contacts, no photos, no apps except for Bumble and a few basic utilities. The call history was wiped clean. The text messages were all deleted. It was like he was trying to erase his digital footprint. But then I found something. Hidden in the Notes app, there was a list. A list of names, dates, and locations. All women. All the dates corresponded to the times he'd been out of town on business trips. The locations were all different cities, different states. And next to each name, there was a single word. Engaged. I felt a cold dread wash over me. Engaged? What did that mean? Was he meeting these women, getting them emotionally invested? And then what? I spent the rest of the night wide awake, piecing together the fragments of information I had, the inconsistencies in his stories, the lack of online presence, the empty phone, the list of names. It all pointed to one thing. He was a con artist. He was using me, manipulating me, just like he'd done with countless other women. But why? What was his game? The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face seeing him, pretending that everything was normal. I needed time to think, to plan. I decided to set a trap. I texted him, pretending that I had to go out of town for a family emergency. I told him I wouldn't be back for a week. He responded immediately, expressing his concern and offering his support. It seemed genuine, but I knew better now. I waited until he was at work. Then I went to his apartment. He'd given me a key a few weeks earlier, a gesture that now felt like a calculated move. The apartment was small, sparsely furnished. It felt temporary, impersonal. I started searching, methodically going through every drawer, every closet, every corner. And then I found it. Hidden in a box under the bed, there was a stack of fake IDs, each with his picture but a different name. There were passports, driver's licenses, credit cards, all in different identities. There was also a scrapbook filled with photos of women, the same women from the list on his phone. They were all smiling, happy, blissfully unaware of the truth. But then I noticed something else. In the corner of one of the photos, there was a small, almost imperceptible detail. A symbol. A strange, unfamiliar symbol that looked vaguely cultish. I took a picture of the symbol with my phone, then carefully put everything back where I found it. I left the apartment feeling sick to my stomach. I knew I had to go to the police. I went straight to the station and told them everything. They listened patiently, took my statement, and promised to investigate. But I could tell they were skeptical. They'd heard stories like this before. Con artists are notoriously difficult to catch. They warned me that it could take time, that there was no guarantee they'd be able to find him. I didn't care. I just wanted him gone. I wanted him out of my life. I went back to my apartment and packed a bag. I couldn't stay there, not knowing that he might come back. I drove to my sister's house and crashed on her couch for a few days. I was a mess. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about him. I kept replaying every moment of our relationship in my head, searching for clues I'd missed. A week later, I got a call from the police. They'd found him. He was in another state, using a different name, romancing another woman. They arrested him on multiple charges of fraud and identity theft. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. But the experience changed me. It shattered my trust in people, made me question everything I thought I knew about love and relationships. I'm still wary of dating apps, still hesitant to let anyone get too close. But I'm also grateful. Grateful that I got out before it was too late. Grateful that I trusted my gut, even when it was telling me something I didn't want to hear. And grateful that I learned a valuable lesson, that sometimes the most charming people are the most dangerous, and that internet people are not always who they seem. Okay, so I met him on a dating app. Not even one of the fancy ones, just some random free one I downloaded when I was bored one night. I'd been single for a while, just going through the motions, you know? Work, eat, sleep, repeat. I figured, why not? Maybe I'd meet someone interesting. I should have known better. His name was Julian. His profile was understated. Just a couple of pictures, one of him hiking, another of him reading in a coffee shop. He looked normal, maybe even a little nerdy, which is usually my type. His bio was short and sweet. Looking for someone to share adventures with. Seemed harmless enough. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. The conversation started out pretty normal. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, our favorite movies. He was surprisingly witty and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. After a few days of chatting, he asked me out. He suggested a small, out-of-the-way restaurant. Again, nothing too alarming. I like trying new places. I checked it out online, decent reviews, nothing weird. I texted my best friend, Sarah, the name and address, just in case. You know, the usual safety precautions. The night of the date, I was actually kind of excited. Julian looked even better in person. He was taller than I expected, with these intense, dark eyes. He was charming and attentive, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. I felt like I was actually connecting with someone. But then, things started to get off. It started subtly. He asked me a lot of questions about my past relationships, which is normal, I guess, but he kept pressing for details. He wanted to know exactly how they ended, who broke up with whom, And why? It felt a little intrusive, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just trying to get to know me better. Then he started talking about control. Not in a creepy, dominant way, but in a philosophical way. He talked about how important it was to have control over your own life, to make your own choices. He said that people who let others control them were weak and pathetic. It was a weird tangent, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. After dinner, he suggested we go for a walk in a nearby park. It was a beautiful night, and the park was mostly deserted. I agreed, thinking it would be nice to stretch my legs and enjoy the cool air. As we walked, he started talking about his family. He said he didn't have any close relationships with them and that he preferred it that way. He said that family was just a burden, a source of obligation and guilt. He seemed angry. We reached a secluded area of the park, away from the main path. It was dark and quiet, surrounded by trees. That's when he stopped walking and turned to face me. His expression had changed. The charming smile was gone, replaced by a cold, unsettling stare. "You know," he said, his voice low and even, "I've been watching you for a while." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I mean, I know where you work, where you live, who your friends are. I know everything about you." I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, but my legs were frozen in place. "Why?" I managed to whisper. "Because I wanted to see if you were worth it," he said, taking a step closer. "I wanted to see if you were strong enough to handle me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and shiny. It was a knife. "Don't worry," he said, seeing the terror in my eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you yet. I just want to see how you react." He held the knife out in front of him, the blade glinting in the moonlight. I stared at it, paralyzed with fear. I knew I had to do something, but I couldn't think. Then, something inside me snapped. All the fear, all the anxiety, all the years of being a pushover just vanished. I don't know where it came from, but a surge of anger coursed through me. I screamed. I screamed as loud as I could, hoping someone would hear me. Julian flinched, surprised by my sudden outburst. I used that moment of hesitation to my advantage. I kicked him. I kicked him as hard as I could in the groin. He doubled over in pain, dropping the knife. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, sprinting as fast as I could through the dark park. I could hear him behind me, yelling and cursing. I didn't look back. I just kept running until I reached the main path, where there were other people. I ran to a group of teenagers and begged them to help me. They looked confused but dialed 911. The police arrived quickly and took me to the station. I gave them a statement, told them everything that had happened. They took the knife as evidence and started searching for Julian. They found him a few hours later, hiding in a nearby motel. He didn't resist arrest. He was charged with assault and stalking. The trial was a nightmare. Julian's lawyer tried to paint me as a liar, as someone who was just trying to get attention. But I stood my ground. I told the truth, and the jury believed me. Julian was found guilty and sentenced to several years in prison. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Even after he was behind bars, I still felt like he was watching me. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and started carrying pepper spray. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that he would somehow escape and come after me. It's been 2 years since the attack, and I'm still struggling to recover. I have nightmares almost every night. I have trust issues. I have not tried dating since. I avoid dating apps like the plague. I don't think I will ever date again. The whole experience changed me, not for the better. I don't trust anyone, not even myself. I replay that night and think if I did something differently, it may have had a different outcome. The worst part is that I still don't know why he chose me. What was it about me that made him think I was worth it? Was it something I said? Something I did? I'll probably never know. I just hope that by sharing my story, I can help other women avoid the same fate. Be careful who you meet online. Trust your instincts. And never, ever let anyone take away your control. It's a scary world out there, especially in the dating world. You think you know someone, but you really don't. People can hide their true intentions, their true selves. And sometimes, those true selves are terrifying. It is not worth the risk. That experience taught me to always be aware of my surroundings and, more importantly, to trust my gut. It started innocently enough. I was newly single, a little lonely, and ready to jump back into the dating pool. The usual apps felt Well, usual. Mind-numbing swiping, the same tired pickup lines, the constant ghosting. So, when a friend suggested trying a local online forum for connecting with like-minded individuals, I figured why not? It felt a bit old school, a bit less shallow than the mainstream apps. The forum was pretty basic, just a bulletin board style layout, where people posted personal ads. I scrolled through a few, mostly guys looking for casual flings, until I came across one that caught my eye. His name was listed as Arthur, and his ad was surprisingly well written. He talked about his love for classic literature, his passion for hiking in the nearby mountains, and his desire for a meaningful connection with someone intelligent and compassionate. No shirtless selfies, no pressure for immediate hookups, just genuine-sounding interest. We exchanged a few messages on the forum, and I was impressed by his vocabulary and his thoughtful responses. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking about my hobbies, my career aspirations, my favorite books. It was refreshing after the endless parade of "Hey, and what's up?" messages I was used to. After a week or so of online chatting, we decided to meet in person. He suggested a small, independent bookstore cafe in the center of town. It seemed like a safe, public place, and I was excited to finally meet the guy behind the words. The day of the date, I felt a flutter of anticipation. I took extra care getting ready, wanting to make a good impression. As I walked into the bookstore, I scanned the tables, looking for someone who matched the vague description Arthur had given me. Tall, dark hair, glasses. Then I saw him. He was sitting in a quiet corner, surrounded by stacks of books, just as he described. He looked up as I approached and smiled. It was a warm, inviting smile that put me at ease. "You must be my name," he said, standing up to greet me. His voice was deep and resonant, just like I'd imagined. We exchanged pleasantries, ordered coffee, and settled in for what I hoped would be a pleasant afternoon. For the first hour or so, everything was perfect. We talked about books, movies, our shared love for the outdoors. He was articulate, engaging, and genuinely interested in my opinions. He even quoted some of my favorite authors, which made me feel like he'd really taken the time to get to know me. But then, things started to shift. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. He started asking more personal questions about my living situation, my family, my past relationships. I answered honestly, but something about the intensity of his gaze made me feel uneasy. He began to steer the conversation towards more philosophical topics, talking about fate, destiny, and the idea that certain people are meant to be together. It was a little intense for a first date, but I chalked it up to his quirky personality. Then, he started talking about my schedule. He asked what time I usually went to bed, what my routine was like in the mornings, if I had any plans for the weekend. It felt less like casual conversation and more like he was gathering information. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My gut was telling me something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I tried to change the subject, but he kept circling back, probing for more details about my life. The more he talked, the more uncomfortable I became. His eyes seemed to bore into me, like he was trying to see something hidden beneath the surface. His smile no longer felt warm and inviting, but cold and calculating. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I made an excuse about having to meet a friend and stood up to leave. "It was nice meeting you, Arthur," I said, trying to sound polite but firm. He stood up too, blocking my path. "But I thought we were just getting started," he said, his voice suddenly lower and more menacing. "I feel like we have a real connection." I tried to step around him, but he grabbed my arm. Not hard, but enough to stop me. "Let go of me," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't let go. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a strange, unsettling intensity. "Don't you see?" he whispered. "We're meant to be together. It's fate." Panic welled up inside me. I pulled my arm away from him and backed away, bumping into a nearby bookshelf. Books tumbled to the floor, creating a loud crash that startled everyone in the cafe. Taking advantage of the distraction, I turned and ran. I didn't stop running until I was out of the bookstore and safely on the busy street. I didn't look back. I immediately blocked Arthur on the forum and deleted my profile. I felt shaken and violated, like I'd narrowly escaped something dangerous. The experience left me paranoid and anxious. I started checking the locks on my doors obsessively, avoiding walking alone at night, and jumping at every unexpected sound. I told my friends and family what had happened, and they were supportive, but also a little dismissive, chalking it up to a bad date. But it wasn't just a bad date. It was a wake-up call. It taught me that online personas can be deceiving, and that you can never truly know someone until you meet them in person. It taught me that even seemingly harmless conversations can be used to gather information and manipulate others. Most importantly, it taught me to trust my gut, that feeling of unease I had during the date, that nagging voice telling me something was wrong. I should have listened to it sooner. I ignored my intuition because I didn't want to be rude, because I wanted to give him a chance. But in doing so, I put myself in danger. Now, I'm much more cautious about who I meet online. I do thorough background checks, meet in well-lit, public places, and always tell a friend or family member where I'm going and who I'm meeting. That experience taught me to always be aware of red flags and to not ignore that feeling in the pit of my stomach that tells me something isn't right. It's a lesson I'll never forget, and one that has undoubtedly kept me safe ever since. It showed me to trust my inner voice, the one that warns of danger, even when everything seems fine on the surface. That date was a chilling reminder that not everyone is who they seem to be, and that my safety is my responsibility. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. They were there, subtle at first, like little glitches in a carefully constructed program. But I was so caught up in the initial rush, the intoxicating feeling of finally connecting with someone who seemed to truly see me, that I brushed them aside, chalking them up to quirks, insecurities, or just plain bad days. It started with the texts. We met on a dating app, one of those that prides itself on matching people based on shared interests and values. His profile was thoughtful, articulate, and funny. He listed all my favorite books, movies, and bands. It felt almost too good to be true. Our first date was perfect. We met at a cozy bookstore cafe, talked for hours, and discovered we had an uncanny amount in common. He listened intently when I spoke, made me laugh until my sides hurt, and even teared up when I told him about my grandmother. I felt like I had known him my whole life. After that, we were inseparable. We went on long walks in the park, cooked elaborate meals together, and spent countless nights talking until the sun came up. He was charming, intelligent, and incredibly attentive. He showered me with compliments, surprised me with thoughtful gifts, and made me feel like the most important person in the world. It was intense, but in a way that felt exciting and romantic. The first red flag appeared about a month into the relationship. I had made plans to go out with some friends for a belated birthday celebration. I mentioned it to him casually, expecting him to be happy that I was having fun. Instead, his face clouded over. He became quiet and withdrawn. I thought we were going to spend the evening together, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I had something special planned. I explained that I had made these plans weeks ago and that I couldn't just cancel on my friends. He eventually relented, but not without making me feel incredibly guilty for prioritizing my friends over him. It's just, I miss you when we're apart, he said, his eyes pleading. I just want to spend every moment with you. I told myself it was just a sign of how much he cared. I reassured myself that he was just afraid of losing me. But deep down, a little voice of doubt started to whisper. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of highs and lows. He continued to be incredibly loving and attentive, but his possessiveness grew stronger. He started texting me constantly when I was away from him, demanding to know where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. He would get visibly upset if I didn't respond immediately. He started showing up unannounced at my work, just to surprise me. He would scrutinize my social media, questioning every like, every comment, every new follower. He even started making disparaging remarks about my friends, saying they were bad influences and that they didn't understand our relationship. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would always turn the conversation around, making me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. He would accuse me of not trusting him, of not appreciating his love, of trying to push him away. I'm just afraid of losing you, he would say, his voice laced with vulnerability. I just want to protect what we have. I started to feel suffocated. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, afraid of saying or doing anything that might upset him. I started to withdraw from my friends, to avoid situations that might trigger his jealousy. I was isolating myself, slowly but surely. Then came the incident with my ex. It was nothing really. He had just sent me a birthday message on social media. A simple happy birthday. That was it. But when my boyfriend saw it, he completely lost it. He accused me of still being in love with my ex, of secretly wanting to get back together with him. He screamed. He cried. He threw things. It was terrifying. I tried to explain that it meant nothing, that it was just a friendly gesture, but he wouldn't listen. He was convinced that I was lying. The argument escalated until he grabbed my arm, his grip tightening until it hurt. He didn't hit me, but the fear in his eyes was enough. That was the breaking point. I knew I had to get out. I ended things the next day. It was messy, painful, and emotionally draining. He begged. He pleaded. He threatened. He promised to change, to be better, to give me everything I wanted. But I stood my ground. I knew that if I stayed, I would be trapped in a cycle of control and abuse. It's been a year since then. I'm still healing. I'm still learning to trust my instincts, to recognize the warning signs before it's too late. I'm still trying to rebuild the friendships I neglected during that dark period of my life. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I missed, the subtle manipulations, the gradual erosion of my independence. I was so blinded by the initial infatuation that I ignored the alarm bells ringing in my head. I let myself be swept away by the intensity of his emotions, mistaking possessiveness for love, jealousy for affection. I learned a valuable lesson. Love should never feel like a prison. Love should never require you to sacrifice your friendships, your passions, or your sense of self. Love should be empowering, not controlling. And most importantly, you should always trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I'm still working on forgiving myself for not seeing the warning signs sooner. But I'm also proud of myself for having the courage to walk away, to choose my own safety and well-being over a relationship that was toxic and destructive. I'm finally free, and I'm determined to never let anyone control me again. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. I will never look at a person the same way again. It was one of those dating app success stories that everyone envied. Me, awkward and perpetually single, matched with Liam. Liam, with his kind eyes, disarming smile, and a bio that suggested we shared a love for obscure indie films and hiking trails. He was, in every digital sense, my ideal man, and he seemed genuinely interested in me. Not just the curated, filtered version I presented online, but the real, messy me. We messaged for a week before agreeing to meet. The conversation flowed effortlessly, bouncing between shared interests and surprisingly vulnerable confessions. He talked about his anxieties about his career, and I admitted my lifelong struggle with social anxiety. We found comfort in our shared insecurities, a connection that felt rare and precious. The date was at a small, dimly lit bookstore cafe. I remember being ridiculously nervous, smoothing down my dress 100 times and rehearsing witty opening lines in my head. But the moment I saw him, standing near the entrance with a shy smile, my anxiety melted away. He was even more attractive in person, with a warmth that radiated outwards. The date went perfectly. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we delved into every topic imaginable. He laughed at my silly jokes, and I listened intently as he described his dreams of opening a nonprofit dedicated to environmental conservation. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely compassionate. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We dated for 6 months. 6 blissful months of romantic picnics, late-night movie marathons, and hand-holding strolls through the park. He met my friends, who adored him. He charmed my family, who finally stopped nagging me about finding someone. Liam was everything I had ever wanted in a partner, and I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Then came the trip. He suggested a weekend getaway to a secluded cabin in the mountains, a chance to escape the city and reconnect with nature. He said, it sounded idyllic, a chance to deepen our bond and create lasting memories. I eagerly agreed. The drive was long, winding through narrow mountain roads with breathtaking views. He played my favorite music, and we sang along, laughing and joking like teenagers. The cabin was even more charming than I had imagined, rustic, cozy, with a crackling fireplace and a panoramic view of the surrounding forest. That first night was magical. We cooked dinner together, a simple pasta dish with a bottle of red wine. We sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets, sharing stories and dreams. He told me he was falling in love with me, and I confessed that I felt the same way. We made love, slow and tender, under the soft glow of the firelight. It was perfect. But the next morning, everything changed. I woke up alone. The fire had died down, and the cabin was cold. I called out his name, but there was no answer. I searched the cabin, checking every room, every corner. He was gone. Panic started to set in. Maybe he went for a walk. Maybe he had an emergency and had to leave. I tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting him, but there was no response. Hours passed. I paced the cabin, my anxiety growing with each tick of the clock. The sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The forest outside seemed to press in, its silence amplifying my fear. Then I found the note. It was lying on the kitchen table, a single sheet of paper folded in half. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The words were written in his familiar handwriting, but the message was chilling. "I know what you did." My blood ran cold. What did he mean? What had I done? I racked my brain, trying to recall anything, any action, any word that could have triggered this. But I came up empty. I reread the note, my heart pounding in my chest. "I know what you did." The words echoed in my mind, laced with menace and accusation. Then I heard the sound, a soft scratching at the door. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. My breath caught in my throat. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. I crept towards the door, my hand reaching for the nearest weapon, a heavy iron poker leaning against the fireplace. I pressed my ear against the door, listening intently. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then a voice, muffled and distorted, whispered from the other side, "Let me in." I didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't Liam's. It was deeper, raspier, with a hint of something inhuman. I stumbled back, my grip tightening on the poker. I didn't know who was outside, but I knew I couldn't let them in. The scratching started again, accompanied by a series of soft thuds against the door. It sounded like someone was trying to break in, slowly, methodically. I ran to the windows, peering out into the darkness. I couldn't see anything, just a dense, impenetrable forest surrounding the cabin. I was trapped. The scratching and thudding continued throughout the night, punctuated by the occasional whispered threat. I huddled in a corner, trembling with fear, clutching the poker for dear life. As dawn approached, the sounds finally stopped. The silence was even more terrifying than the noise. I waited for hours, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Finally, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, I cautiously approached the door. I peered through the peephole. Nothing. I slowly opened the door, bracing myself for the worst. The porch was empty. The forest was still. I stepped outside, scanning the surroundings. There was no sign of anyone, no footprints in the dirt, no indication that anyone had been there at all, except for the symbol carved into the wooden door. A symbol I recognized from a nightmare I had when I was a child. A symbol associated with ancient cults and unspeakable rituals. A symbol that meant death. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, away from the cabin, away from the forest, away from the symbol that haunted my dreams. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road. I flagged down a passing car, a kind elderly couple who took me to the nearest town. I called the police, told them everything that had happened. They investigated the cabin, but found nothing. No sign of Liam, no sign of a break-in, no symbol on the door. They suggested I had imagined it all, that I was suffering from some kind of mental breakdown. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that it was all a dream, but I knew it wasn't. Liam was gone, and someone, or something, knew a secret I didn't even know I possessed. I moved back home, surrounded by my family and friends. I tried to forget about Liam, about the cabin, about the symbol, but I couldn't. The nightmare replays in my head every night. The scratching at the door, the whispered threats, the symbol of death, and the question that haunts me the most. What did Liam know? And what am I going to do if they ever find me? I should have trusted my instincts when his profile picture was a heavily filtered selfie taken in what looked like his mother's basement. I ignored that. I was new to the city, lonely, and genuinely trying to put myself out there. Dinner and a movie? Mark had suggested after a few days of fairly generic online banter. Seemed harmless enough. Plenty of public places. Lots of opportunities for escape if things went south. Famous last words, right? He picked me up in a minivan. A beat-up, dented, vaguely unsettling minivan. I tried not to judge. Maybe he had kids. Maybe he was just practical. But the inside was, well, let's just say it smelled strongly of stale cigarettes and something vaguely reminiscent of wet dog. He apologized, blaming his cousin who borrowed it. but the damage was done. My internal alarm bells were already starting to clang. Dinner was at a chain restaurant. Fine, whatever. I wasn't expecting Michelin stars. But he spent the entire meal complaining about the prices, the slow service, and the lip-turned waitress who, according to him, was clearly flirting with him. He punctuated his rants with loud, wet coughs and kept picking at his teeth with a toothpick he pulled from his wallet. My appetite vanished about 5 minutes in. I managed to choke down a few bites of my pasta, mostly because I didn't want to be rude. I was starting to seriously regret this whole endeavor. The movie was even worse. He chose a low-budget horror flick that was so bad it was almost comical. But he wasn't laughing. He was squirming in his seat, making loud, nervous noises, and occasionally grabbing my arm during the jump scares. I'm not a huge fan of horror movies in general, but this was just unbearable. I spent most of the time staring at the emergency exit sign, plotting my escape. I should have trusted my instincts before even getting in that minivan. After the movie, he suggested we go back to his place for a nightcap. I politely declined, citing an early morning meeting. He pressed, insisting it would just be one drink, and that he had a really cool vintage record player I had to see. I held my ground, repeating my excuse with slightly more force. He finally relented, but not without a visible pout and a muttered comment about stuck-up girls. The drive back to my apartment was agonizing. He kept trying to hold my hand, even though I was actively pulling away. He talked nonstop about his ex-girlfriend, who, according to him, was crazy and jealous and didn't appreciate a good man. Red flags, my friends, red flags everywhere. He said that she wouldn't understand his collection that he had been working on. I wasn't interested in finding out about his collection after what he's been saying. I was just going to get out of that minivan and go home. That was the only thing on my mind. When we finally arrived at my building, I practically leaped out of the van. I thanked him for the lovely evening through gritted teeth and practically sprinted to the front door. He lingered for a moment, watching me with this unsettling, almost predatory gaze that made my skin crawl. I fumbled with my keys, desperate to get inside. I finally got the door open and slammed it shut behind me, locking it with a satisfying click. I leaned against the door, catching my breath, and feeling a wave of relief wash over me. I was safe. I was home. The nightmare was over, right? Wrong. The next morning, I woke up to a series of text messages from an unknown number. They were unsettling, vague, threatening, and filled with bizarre references to things we had talked about the night before. Things he shouldn't have remembered. Things I barely remembered myself. He knew where I lived. He knew my work schedule. He knew things he couldn't have possibly known unless he was watching me. I blocked the number, but the messages kept coming from different numbers, each one more disturbing than the last. I started to panic. I felt like I was being stalked, haunted by this creepy guy I had met on a dating app. This person kept referring to this collection he talked about in the minivan. I contacted the police, but they couldn't do much without concrete evidence. They suggested I change my locks, vary my routine, and keep my phone on me at all times. Helpful, but not exactly reassuring. I told them he mentioned something about a collection that he had been working on, and that his ex-girlfriend did not understand it. They jotted that down in their notes. For weeks, I lived in a state of constant paranoia. I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every phone call, and couldn't sleep without checking every lock in my apartment multiple times. I was terrified to leave my house, afraid of what might be waiting for me outside. Then, one morning, I found something taped to my front door. It was a picture of me, taken through my living room window. I was sitting on my couch, reading a book, completely unaware that I was being watched. Scrawled across the picture in red ink were the words, "You're next for the collection." That was it. I was done. I packed a bag, grabbed my cat, and drove straight to my sister's house in another state. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my friends. I just disappeared. I trusted my instincts to leave, and I am glad I did. I've been living here for a few months now, slowly trying to rebuild my life. I changed my name, got a new phone number, and started seeing a therapist. I still have nightmares about Mark and his minivan and his creepy, watchful eyes. He knows too much for someone to know. I still get the occasional shiver down my spine, the feeling that I'm being watched. But I try to tell myself it's just paranoia, that he can't possibly find me here, that I'm safe now. But deep down, I know the truth. I know that he's still out there, watching, waiting, collecting. I should have trusted my instincts from the second I saw that goddamn minivan. The reason I didn't listen to my instincts was because I wanted to settle down. I always wanted someone to love and someone to be with. I was impatient and didn't listen to my own mind. Now that I am older and wiser, I know to listen and trust in my gut. I am happy that I managed to leave.